Alright, so we're going to have a look at rounding and the two types of rounding you're most likely to come across, rounding to decimal places or rounding to significant figures. Now, rounding to decimal places is where you start with a decimal, such as 2.3572, and it might be that that number's too precise. Maybe it doesn't matter that the last two digits are 72. Maybe it's enough just to say that it's around 2 and a bit. And the method for rounding to a certain number of decimal places requires us to know how many decimal places we want to round to. So maybe we want it to 1 decimal place, or 2 decimal places, or 3 decimal places. Now, if I want to take this number and round it to 1 decimal place, then what that means is that this is where I want my number to stop. But unfortunately, we can't just stop there and write 2.3. Because when we're rounding, we don't just look at where we want our number to stop. We do have to look at what number comes next. Now, the rule is, if the number that comes next is 5 or above, it actually pushes our last digit up. So in this case, our answer to 1 decimal place is 2.4. So what happened there is we wanted our number to stop after the first decimal place, because we're rounding to 1 decimal place. We wanted it to stop after this 3, but because the next number was a 5, writing 2.3 is incorrect. We'd have to write 2.4 because that 5 pushes that digit 3 up to a 4. So if we look at rounding it to 2 decimal places as well, this time it's the same again, but I draw the line in a different place. I want my number to stop after the second decimal point, after the second place after the decimal, which means I want my number to stop here. But again, I can't just stop my number there and say that it's 2.35 because I have to look at the number that comes next. And because that number is a 7, that's 5 or above, which means our number to 2 decimal places isn't 2.35, it's 2.36. And if we do one more, but to 3 decimal places this time, this is where I want my number to stop. I can't just write 2.357, I have to look at the number that comes next. Now this time, our number is not 5 or above, it's lower than that. So this 7, which is the last digit of our 3 decimal place number, this 7 does not get pushed up to an 8. So it just stays the same, which means to 3 decimal places, it's 2.357. Let's have a look at one more number, and then I'll talk about significant figures. Let's do 12.8931. So to 1 decimal place, just like before, this is where we want our number to stop, but because the number that comes next is a 9, this 8 gets pushed up, making our answer 12.9. To 2 decimal places, let's get rid of that line. To 2 decimal places, that's where I want my number to stop, but I have to look at the number that comes next, which this time is only a 3, which means the 9, which is the last digit, does not get pushed up, making our answer 12.89. And then finally to 3 significant figures, 3 decimal places, sorry, I want my number to stop there. Again, the 1 is quite low, so it doesn't push the 3 up, so it's just 12.893. So that's decimal places. Now let's talk about significant figures. When we were doing the decimal places, when we wanted a number to 3 decimal places, we just counted 1, 2, 3. That's the 3rd place after the decimal, so that's where I need my number to stop. With significant figures, it's similar. We don't start counting at the decimal, we start counting at the first number. So we're going to do 1 significant figure, 2 significant figures, and 3 significant figures, a bit like last time. And let's start with a number like 15, let's make it 153.4 or something like that. Now, like I said, when we did the decimal places, we knew where the 3rd decimal place was because it was the 3rd place after the decimal. You just count the numbers after the decimal, the 3rd one is the 3rd decimal place. With significant figures, you don't start counting at the decimal, you start counting at the first number. So this, to 1 significant figure, it's this 1 that I'm looking at that I might round. I might push it up to a 2 if the next number is big enough, or I might leave it as a 1. Now the next number, the one that comes after the 1, is a 5, which by our rule means that this 1 should get pushed up. So that 1's going to become a 2, but writing 2 is way far away from our original number. How can 153.4 round to 2? Well, remember, that 1 that we just turned into a 2 isn't just a 1, that's a 100. So when it gets pushed up to a 2, it becomes 200, and that's it. 153.4 to 1 significant figure is 200. Let's do the same again to 2 significant figures. So this time it's the 5 that's the second number. So the 1 is the first number, the 5 is the second number. So it's the 5 that I'm looking at rounding. And the next number, this 3, is not big enough to push that 5 up to a 6. So the 5 is going to stay as a 5. The 1 didn't change. So a bit like last time, we're left with 15, but that 5 isn't just 5, it represents 50. So it rounds to 150. And finally, if we do 3 significant figures, 1 is the first significant figure, 5 is the second, 3 is the third. So it's this 3 that we're looking at rounding, but we do have to look at the next number to see if that 3 stays as a 3 or goes up to a 4. And because the next number is quite low, it's 4, it's not 5 or above, our 3 does not get pushed up to a 4, meaning that to 3 significant figures, we just stop our number there, 153. Now let's just look at a slightly different one. Let's do 1.927. Yeah. So to 1 significant figure, we just look at the first number, which is 1. Is the next number big enough to push it up? Yes, it is. So that 1 is going to turn into a 2. And we don't have to deal with adding any extra zeros this time because that 1 does just represent 1. So when it turns into a 2, it just represents 2. To 2 significant figures, we have to look at the 9 because that's the second number in our number. We look at the 9. Is it going to stay the same or is it going to go up? Well, the next number is only a 2, so it does not get pushed up, meaning that we just stop our number at 1.9. And finally, to 3 significant figures, the 2 is the third significant figure. And we look at the next number to see whether that 2 stays the same or changes. And the next number is a 7, which is big enough to push that 2 up, meaning that to 3 significant figures, it's 1.93. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just put some questions up so that if you would like to, you can pause the video and have a little go at those, because in just a sec, I'm going to talk them through. So pause it here if you would like to. Okay, and I'm going to talk through. So on the left-hand side, we're going back to decimal places, and decimal places were probably the easier one of the two. This is where we want our number to stop, because that's the second place after the decimal, the second decimal place. But because the next number, this 7, is quite large, it's going to push that 5 up to a 6, making our answer 12.86. And with this one, that's where we want our number to finish. It's the 8 we're looking at, but it's the 4 that decides whether that 8 is going to stay as an 8 or go up to a 9. And the 4 is only low, so it's not big enough to push the 8 up to a 9, making our answer 231.08. Now the significant figures, 3 significant figures for both these numbers. So there's your first, second, third significant figure. So our number is going to be something like 85.9. We just need to check whether or not the next number is big enough to push the 9 up. But because it's only a 2, it's not big enough to push the 9 up. So it's 85.9. And again, with this number over here, it's the 7, which is the third significant figure. And we look at the next number to decide whether the 7 gets pushed up or stays as a 7. And the next number is big this time, so that 7 is going to get pushed up to an 8. But the answer isn't just 148, because like our examples earlier, that's way far from our original number. So this 1 still represents 10,000, and the 4 still represents thousands, and 7 is hundreds, although now it's an 8. So we need to put these zeros on to make those numbers worth the same amount as they were before. So I hope that helped. That's rounding to decimal places and significant figures.